Maxey from outside. Sixers lead, courtesy of Tyrese Maxey.
Deep to left field, going back is Locastro. It is gone!
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Beef Up Front podcast here on Pick Swap Media. Your host, Ryan Coyle, continuing on with our college football preview series. Busy day for me today on my third show. Already recorded Texas earlier, then recorded the podcast doing the entire college football playoff prediction. And today we go into the number one team in the country as we head into the 2024 season, part of our preview, the national champion favorite as we head into 2024 and the first ever 12-team college football playoff, and that is the Georgia Bulldogs out of the SEC. Said number one in the AP poll, the favorite to win the national title at plus 300, the favorite to win the SEC as well. So these are the guys that are projected to bring everything home this year. Arguably could have last year if they had made the playoff, if they hadn't have lost to Alabama in the SEC title game, they probably would have been the favorite to go and do a three-peat after winning the national title the previous 2 years. But I got tripped up by Alabama in that SEC title game. Didn't make the playoff, obviously, under a lot of scrutiny. People still believe they should have made it, but that's a story for last year. We move into this year, and Georgia's back. They're reloaded, and they are ready again. Bulldogs still led by head coach Kirby Smart, 94-16 as he enters year 9 at Georgia. I can't believe it's already been 9 years. It's pretty wild how long he's already been there, but 94-16, nothing short of dominant, has won 2 national titles, best coach in college football. I think you polled, 100 different college football media people, fans, whatever, 95 of them are going to at least say Kirby Smart, and might even be 100 for 100. But he has turned that into a dominant force. Nick Saban still tripped him up twice, 2021 and 2023 in the SEC title game. Then they beat Alabama Georgia beat Alabama in the 2021 national championship game to kind of get some revenge there. But, outside of Alabama, Georgia has really had their way with just about everyone over these last few years. And now that Nick Saban's gone, who knows? Georgia might even take it to another level. So a loaded SEC, you get Texas and Oklahoma in there to go with these big dogs in Alabama, in an Ole Miss that's as good as ever. Teams like Missouri on the rise. Auburn is coming back as well. But when you look at Georgia since 2020, since November of 2020, Georgia is 46-2. Those 2 losses are those 2 SEC title games to Alabama. So undefeated, 46-0 against everyone else since November of 2020. They've just became an absolute wagon, a juggernaut, and the face, I think you could say right now, of college football. They are the measuring stick in the sport right now. When you look at the 2023 season, 13-1, another really dominant year, undefeated regular season, 8-0 in the SEC. They lose in that SEC title game. They get tripped up 27-24 to Alabama, so only have 1 loss. Still a debate whether or not, going into Selection Sunday, would Georgia still make it? Would Florida State get in? Would Alabama get in? This year, obviously, the winner of the conference title game of the SEC, they automatically get in. So no debate or anything after that. Georgia wins last year after being number 1 the entire season mostly. They go, obviously, to the college football playoff and probably are the 1 seed and probably the favorite over Michigan as well. They get tripped up by Alabama. They go to the Orange Bowl against FSU, who gets left out of the college football playoff. Obviously, no Jordan Travis, a lot of opt-outs, and Georgia absolutely beats the brakes off them 63-3. So they kind of had a sour taste in their mouth and wanted to get it out. Ranked top 20 in the 4 major offensive and defensive categories, 5th best scoring offense at 40 points per game, 5th best scoring defense at 15.6 points per game. Won 7 games last year by 25 or more. And like I said, I think they would have beat Michigan if they had met up in the national title game. But they were unable to compete the three-peat, and the march to the next national title begins this year against Clemson in week 1. But entering the year at number 1 in the nation, favorite to win it all, again at plus 300, and offense, defense, not many teams in the country stack up against them. When you look at the offense, I don't think the offense under this, recent run of dominance from Georgia and Kirby Smart gets as much credit as they should. When you think Georgia, I think you think dominant defense, but the offense really has been just as good over these past few years. 5th in scoring last year, 20th in rushing, 11th in passing, and 5th in total. Scored 35 or more in 9 of their 13 games last season. 9 of their 14 games last year. And this offense returns 9 starters, headlined by quarterback Carson Beck, who is in the discussion to be potentially the number 1 overall pick or number 1 player off the board, up there with Shedeur Sanders. I've seen James Pierce, the defensive end from Tennessee. If Carson Beck goes out there and replicates what he did last season at Georgia, he's certainly going to be right up there in the discussion once again. An astounding 72% of his passes he completed last year, Carson Beck, for 3,941 yards, which was first in the SEC, had 24 passing touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. Not that much of a mobile guy, doesn't really do much damage outside the pocket, but very dangerous when you give him time in the pocket. He can dice up some defenses. Some very important skill guys leave, though, who were very valuable pieces to those national title squads in the receiving game with Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers. I think those were the 2 kind of faces of the passing game. They're out the door to the NFL. That's some significant production that they're going to have to make up. Leading rushers Kendall Milton and Dejon Edwards are gone as well. So this year's Georgia team will be counting on some transfers pretty heavily to make up for that production. One of my favorite additions in the portal, and I was really surprised he even left his school, but he leaves his school and he goes to a rival. That's Trevor Etienne, the running back from Florida. He goes to Georgia, the younger brother of Travis Etienne, but another really dynamic player and a guy who I think will fit right in at Georgia and probably have even more success. He ran for over 1,400 yards and 14 touchdowns in 2 years for the Florida Gators. Now he goes to Georgia, better all-around system. He's going to have a lot more opportunities, I think, to succeed. Sure, Georgia has, a pretty deep running back room, but Trevor Etienne, I think, is going to be the guy in there and play himself into being like a round 2, round 3 pick in the NFL draft this year. They bring in 3 receivers in London Humphreys from Vandy, Colby Young from Miami, and Michael Jackson III from USC. Those guys are going to be counted on to make up for some of that production left by McConkey and Bowers. And Dominic Lovett is back. He's, a good old reliable. Feels like he's been there for quite some time now, but he's a good, reliable target on this team. And then Oscar Delp, he's going to be looked at the tight end spot. They bring in a transfer from Stanford at the tight end spot too. But Brock Bowers, I think we could make an argument over his 3-year run at Georgia, was the best tight end for sure in the sport. But you can make an argument one of the top 5 overall pass catchers. That's a significant loss. And I know he missed some time last year with an injury, with that ankle injury, but he's a dynamic force that's certainly going to be missed. We've seen the way that Georgia could play without him, but that's a big spot. And Ladd McConkey too, guy on 3rd down, short passing game. He was the kind of the go-to guy. So a lot of moving parts there at the skilled position spots, but they do return up front on the offensive line. They're 4 starters, both tackles, both guards, the center's out. But while they have a lot of moving parts, majority of the offensive line back, the quarterback is back, being the key piece. 80% of the line, as we said, and the skill spots are strong again. Buckle up. This is going to be a unit that goes out there and puts up a lot of points week in and week out. Defense, I think defense and the defensive brand is associated more with Georgia now than any brand in all of college football. You can look at Michigan last year. I think you look at Alabama from, when I started growing up watching college football in the early 2010s, when they really took off. That was kind of their thing. They were associated with defense. I think Michigan kind of had that last year. But when I think college football defense in 2024, I'm thinking the Georgia Bulldogs. Any other program you can stack them up against. I don't think anyone's going to argue with kind of the NFL talent factory that they've had over there. It's become a defensive factory. 5th in scoring defense last year, 18th in rushing, 9th in passing, and 9th in total defense. They returned 6 starters from that defense last year, and Kirby just continues to bring in 4- and 5-star recruits. So expect this to be a top 10 unit yet again. The secondary is the question mark on this team, and not because of the talent, but they're relying on a lot of youth and had some key guys go out the door last year. Javon Bullard, Tyke Smith, and Kamari Lassiter were all day 2 NFL draft picks last year. They all need to be replaced. And as always with Georgia, they got 4- and 5-star guys coming up in the wings. They hit the transfer portal. But it could be a bit of an adjustment, take some time. I mean, that is the main team, I think, in college football these days. I mean, you could point to always, but guys more so in the past, you get there as a freshman, you don't play, but you develop. Sophomore, junior, you start to play a little bit. Senior year, you start, or however the development kind of process goes. Now in college football, it's like all right, maybe you get a year of development for guys, but if freshmen 4 or 5 stars aren't playing, they're out the door, they're transferring, or you're bringing in, your own 4 or 5 star transfers. So the continuity, and I think Kirby Smart talked about it recently. He said, not just at Georgia, but across all of college football, teams' depth is going to be really hurt because you don't have those 4 and 5 stars all the time anymore waiting in the wings to take over. And he said that was kind of what separated them apart, where, all right, you have your outside linebacker go down, your starter for 2 years. All right, the next guy's up, and you don't really kind of miss a beat. That's how well they recruit all the talent that they have. Now it's like, all right, if guys aren't playing, they're headed out the door. They can hit the transfer portal. Then you go get paid some money elsewhere. Go be a productive player right away. And then who knows, maybe circle back to Georgia down the line. But that's one of the major kind of issues in college football right now, I think, is the depth. So if Georgia's going out there relying on some youth in the secondary, not that many veteran pieces, what's really behind them? So secondary struggles, they don't really have much to turn to. So that's kind of the weak point and the question mark of the team right now. Dalen Everett's back. He started at 14 games at corner last year, and Javon Bullard is back at safety. He's one of the top safeties in the country. Got some talented freshmen as well in Ellis Robinson, the fourth, and KJ Bolden that figured to be in the mix for time as well. Linebackers and defensive line, as always, loaded with experience and deep, but might not have quite, the top end talent that they've had before at linebacker and at the defensive line. I mean, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Quay Walker, those were all kind of household dominant players. This defense, I don't think, at least right now, they certainly could have a guy emerge, and it can emerge early and often in that Clemson game, but they don't really have the number, 5 overall pick, the number 10 overall pick that we've seen like recently that could just go out there and be a dominant game wrecker. So that's something to watch for, see if they can have somebody step up. Micah Williams, he's a very good pass rusher, though, one of the better pass rushers in the SEC. And as we said, as always, deep and talented, but they might not have that game wrecker like they usually do. So that's something I'm a little bit worried about with this Georgia team as they head into 2024. All right, as always now, we will bring up the schedule. We will break it down game by game and the number 1 overall team in the country as we head into 2024, the Georgia Bulldogs. Start out week 1, one of the marquee games, noon kickoff against Clemson. They're a 14-point favorite in that game. I won't spoil it, but I'm not as high on Georgia fully to go undefeated, win it all this year. So I think they're having a great season. But I do really like them in that spot. I think they go out there, they push Clemson around, and they win that game pretty easily. I think I might even take them to cover in that one. Tennessee Tech, not even worth getting into, a 2-0 start. Then they get their first SEC game. Kentucky, they go to Lexington. They've had their way with Kentucky the past couple times. I'll give them a win there. Then they go to Alabama. That's a tough game. That could be the highest rated game of the entire season, the most watched game, one of the most anticipated regular season games in recent memory in college football. I'm going to have Georgia trip up there. Still think Bama could have their number. A lot of the same guys are there. I think Jalen Milroe and athletic quarterbacks can give these defenses issues at times. So I'm going to give Georgia their first loss of the season there. Auburn gave them some fits last year, but it was at Auburn. So I'm going to have Georgia win that one. But watch out for Auburn to be, a sneaky 8-4 kind of team this year. Mississippi State, one of the bottom teams in the SEC. I'll give Mississippi State a loss there. Georgia rolls in that one. Texas, at Texas, it's another tough spot. We'll get into the Ole Miss game soon too, but their 3 toughest games arguably this year. I mean, you could say with Clemson too being a neutral, but it's in Atlanta, so that's kind of home. But 3 toughest at least SEC games at Alabama, at Texas, at Ole Miss. You get your 3 toughest games all on the road, so that's tough. I'm not that high on this Texas team. I definitely like this Georgia team a little bit more. And out of those 3 games, I could see Georgia going 3-0. I could see them going 0-3. I could see them going 2-1. I could see them going 1-2. These are kind of all pure coin flip games. I wouldn't be surprised if I see them go any other way. But out of Texas, Alabama, and Ole Miss, the team I'm lowest on out of that bunch is Texas. So I'm going to have Georgia winning that game there. Rivalry game, neutral site against Florida in Jacksonville. We will have Georgia win that one. That's the beginning of the end for Florida. At Ole Miss, I talked about it earlier. Ole Miss is my pick to win the SEC this year. I have them going 11-1. Their only loss at LSU. LSU comes off a bye, but also Ole Miss, that's their 7th game in 7 weeks. I'm going to have Ole Miss beating Georgia, statement game there, and that gives Georgia their 2nd loss and their first loss to a team not named Alabama since November of 2020. Tennessee at Georgia, I'm going to give Georgia a win there, but interested to see, 2 losses for Georgia. They've never really been down like that in recent years. Tennessee, how hot are they riding with Nico potentially? That could be a fun one late in the year, but Georgia's had Tennessee's number since Tennessee came into, or since Josh Heupel kind of took over there. UMass, obviously, blowout there for Georgia. And then Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, I think, is going to be a fun team this year, but Georgia gets the win there. So I'm actually a lot lower than most. 95% of people have this team at worst 11-1. Some will have them even 12-0. I'll be very surprised if they do go 12-0, just because that is going to be so tough in this expanded SEC. And like I said, their 3 toughest games are all on the road and a neutral against Clemson. I'd probably put that as their 4th toughest game. But surprisingly, I'm a little bit worried about the defense after I kind of bragged and talked about how that defensive brand is the most recognizable in college football. But the secondary is a big question mark, and you draw Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, and who knows what Kate Klubnik looks like. But Graham Mertz is an experienced quarterback. You have some really tough quarterbacks in the secondary. If that's not a strong suit, you could get exposed. So this might be my biggest mistake of the year, having Georgia only at 10-2, but I still have them making the playoff. That's good enough to get them the 10 seed. It's a no bet for me on the over-under as we've gone through all of them. There's been somewhere, I've picked the over, I've picked the under, but there's a bunch of leans and just an overall no bet for me. I would lean under 10.5 at plus 105. I just keep going back to your 3 toughest games are on the road and your 4th is a neutral. So even if you, out of those 4 games, just say you split them at 2-2, you're still going under the 10.5 there, and it's at plus money. So if I had to make one pick in this really difficult SEC, I would lean the under there. Not as dominant as a roster as we've seen over the past few years with Georgia. But that'll do it for this episode of Beef Up Front here on Pick Swap Media as we continue on with our college football preview series. As always, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and we will talk soon.